Tam Morrison, step away from the cabinet.
The woman you're looking at is Tam Morrison, president of the Ashford Park HOA. What happens next exposes her as the architect of $1 million theft from the very people who elected her.
Who are you? I'm
Seminole
working.
County Sheriff's Office, we have a warrant.
A warrant for what? Can someone tell me what's
Come
going
with us
on?
right now.
Come with you
I
where?
have me.
Within 72 hours of this footage, investigators would seize bank records documenting over 400 separate fraudulent transactions. Transfers from neighborhood dues accounts directly into Tam Morrison's personal checking, payments to her landlord, deposits to her children's accounts, charges at luxury retailers she could never have afforded on her management fee alone. 23 criminal charges, over $1 million stolen, and more than 600 families who had been paying their HOA dues every single month, trusting that the money was going toward pool maintenance, landscaping, and community upkeep, would learn that it had been going somewhere else entirely. Before we continue, have you ever actually looked at where your HOA dues go? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, now's the time. We expose cases like this every single week. Tam Morrison was born in 1981 in Sanford, Florida, a small city just north of Orlando, known for its historic downtown and its proximity to the tourist corridor that would define Central Florida's economy for the next 4 decades. Her father worked maintenance at one of the theme parks. Her mother was a receptionist at a medical billing company. They raised Tam and her younger brother in a modest 3-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where block parties happened in driveways, and where the idea of paying someone else to manage your neighborhood would have seemed absurd. Tam was a good student, not exceptional, but consistent, the kind of kid teachers described as reliable and eager to please. She graduated from Seminole High School in 1999 with a 3.2 GPA and a vague sense that she wanted to do something in business. Her parents couldn't afford to send her to a 4-year university, so she enrolled at Valencia Community College, taking classes part-time while working the front desk at a property management company in Altamonte Springs. That job would shape everything that came after. For 3 years, Tam answered phones, filed paperwork, and watched how the business worked. She saw the monthly dues checks come in from dozens of neighborhoods. She saw the maintenance invoices get paid. She saw the spreadsheets, the bank statements, the annual reports that went out to homeowners who almost never read them. And she saw how much money flowed through these accounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, sometimes more, all managed by a small office with minimal oversight. By 2004, she had earned her associate degree in business administration. By 2006, she had obtained her Florida Community Association manager license, the credential required to professionally manage HOAs in the state. Her supervisors at the property management company described her as detail-oriented, professional, and someone homeowners trusted immediately. She had a gift for it, the ability to make stressed-out board members feel like everything was under control, the knack for diffusing angry homeowners at contentious meetings, the confidence to stand at the front of a room and explain complex budgets in terms anyone could understand. By 2010, Tam Morrison decided she didn't want to work for someone else anymore. She incorporated Morrison Property Services, LLC, a one-woman operation run out of a small office in a strip plaza off State Road, 434 in Winter Springs. Her pitch to potential clients was simple. She was local, she was responsive, and she actually cared about the neighborhoods she managed. Unlike the big corporate firms that treated communities like numbers on a spreadsheet, she would know every board member by name. She would show up to every meeting. She would answer her phone on weekends. It worked. Within 2 years, Morrison Property Services had contracts with 4 homeowners associations across Seminole County. By 2015, that number had grown to 7. Her annual management fees totaled over $180,000. Not a fortune, but a comfortable living for a single proprietor in Central Florida. She hired a part-time assistant to help with paperwork. She upgraded her office. She bought a modest townhouse in Oviedo for herself and her 2 children. To the board members who hired her, Tam Morrison was exactly what they needed. A professional who handled the tedious work of running a neighborhood so they didn't have to. To the homeowners who saw her at community events, she was approachable and competent. To her family and friends, she was a success story. A woman who had built something from nothing, who had turned a front desk job into a thriving business. No one suspected that anything was wrong. No one noticed the first withdrawal. To understand how Tam Morrison stole over $1 million from her neighbors, you first have to understand how homeowners associations actually work, and why they are uniquely vulnerable to exactly this kind of theft. Florida has more homeowners associations than any other state in America. Over 50,000 community associations, governing more than 10 million residents. In Seminole County alone, hundreds of neighborhoods operate under HOA governance, from sprawling master-planned communities with multiple pools and tennis courts to modest subdivisions with nothing more than a shared entrance sign and a few common areas. Every homeowner in these communities is required by deed covenant to pay monthly or quarterly dues, not optional, not voluntary. If you buy a house in an HOA neighborhood, you pay whether you want to or not. In Ashford Park, the community at the center of this case, those dues ranged from $275 to $400 per quarter, depending on the lot size. Multiply that by the 347 homes in the subdivision, and the association collected nearly $500,000 every single year. That money was supposed to go toward landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, liability insurance, reserve funds for future repairs, and the management company's fee. The HOA board, 5 volunteer homeowners elected by their neighbors, was responsible for overseeing the budget and approving expenditures. But here's the problem. Most HOA board members are not financial professionals. They're accountants and nurses and retirees who volunteered because someone had to. They don't have time to review every invoice. They don't have expertise to audit bank statements. They rely entirely on their management company to handle the money, to collect the dues, pay the bills, and provide accurate financial reports. When the management company is honest, this system works fine. When the management company is not honest, this system is a disaster waiting to happen. In 2016, Tam Morrison submitted a proposal to manage Ashford Park, a 347-home community in Winter Springs that had recently fired its previous management company over poor communication. The board was looking for someone local, someone responsive, someone who would actually show up when they called. Tam Morrison seemed perfect. She presented a detailed proposal outlining her services. She provided references from her other HOA clients. She charmed the board at the interview, answering every question with the confidence of someone who had been doing this for years. The vote was unanimous. Morrison Property Services was awarded the Ashford Park contract in March of 2016 at an annual fee of $42,000. Within 6 months, she was also elected president of the HOA board, a position that gave her direct oversight of the very accounts she was managing. The fox was now running the henhouse, and no one thought to question it. The first theft happened in September of 2016, less than 6 months after Tam Morrison took over the Ashford Park account. It was small, just $1,200. A transfer from the HOA's operating account to Morrison Property Services, labeled Supplemental Management Fee. There was no board approval. There was no invoice. There was no documentation at all, just a line item buried in a bank statement that no one would ever review. 2 weeks later, another transfer, $800, then $1,500, then $2,200. By the end of 2016, Tam Morrison had quietly siphoned off $14,000 from the Ashford Park accounts, money that should have been sitting in the reserve fund for roof repairs and parking lot resurfacing, money that homeowners had paid because they had no choice. She wasn't caught, so she kept going. The amounts grew larger. The methods became more sophisticated. She created vendor invoices for landscaping services that were never performed. She paid herself consulting fees for work that didn't exist. She used the HOA's credit card for personal purchases, groceries, gas, clothing, dinners out, then buried the charges in categories like office supplies and meeting expenses. She started paying her rent directly from the HOA account, $1,850 a month, transferred to her landlord without any attempt at concealment. She made car payments. She covered her children's activities, soccer leagues, dance lessons, summer camps. She paid for a family vacation to Disney World. She upgraded her wardrobe. She bought jewelry. In 2018, she took on a second HOA client, a smaller community called Cypress Ridge with 127 homes and annual dues collections of approximately $160,000. Same playbook, same results. Within a year, she had drained over $200,000 from their accounts. The audacity was breathtaking. Tam Morrison attended board meetings every month. She stood in front of homeowners and presented financial reports that she had personally fabricated. She answered questions about the budget with complete confidence, explaining away discrepancies, deflecting concerns, assuring everyone that the reserve fund was healthy and growing. Meanwhile, the actual reserve fund balance was plummeting. Projects that should have been funded were deferred indefinitely. Maintenance was delayed. Amenities deteriorated. When board members asked questions, she had answers ready. The landscaping company raised their rates. Insurance premiums went up. There was an unexpected repair. The economy was tough. And because she controlled the books, because she prepared the reports, because she was the only person who actually understood the HOA's finances, no one could prove otherwise. By 2020, Tam Morrison had stolen over $600,000 from Ashford Park alone. The total across both associations would eventually exceed $1 million. She did it by exploiting a system built on trust, a system that assumed no one would be brazen enough to steal from their own neighbors. She assumed wrong. The beginning of the end came in January of 2023. Not because of a whistleblower, not because of an audit, but because of a question. A new board member had joined Ashford Park's HOA the previous November. A retired forensic accountant named Gerald Watkins, who had moved to Florida from New Jersey to be closer to his grandchildren. Watkins had spent 30 years investigating financial fraud. He knew what red flags looked like, and within 2 months of joining the board, he started seeing them everywhere. The reserve fund balance hadn't grown in years, despite consistently collecting dues from 347 homeowners. Projects kept getting pushed back. The financial reports were detailed but vague in the places that mattered, and every time he asked for supporting documentation, actual bank statements, actual vendor invoices, actual proof that the money was going where Morrison said it was going, she always had a reason why it wasn't available yet. In February of 2023, Watkins made a formal request to the HOA's bank for complete account statements going back 3 years. What he found was devastating. Hundreds of transfers to Morrison Property Services that weren't supported by any contract or invoice. Credit card charges for retailers that had nothing to do with HOA business. Rent payments to an apartment complex in Altamonte Springs. Car payments. Tuition payments. Over $47,000 in a single year to a Lexus dealership. Watkins called an emergency board meeting. He presented his findings, and for the first time, the other board members realized what had been happening right under their noses. The board voted unanimously to terminate Morrison Property Services effective immediately. They changed the bank account passwords. They revoked her credit card access, and they contacted the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. The investigation was just beginning. Seminole County Sheriff's Office Financial Crimes Unit assigned Detective Marcus Holloway to the case, a 12-year veteran who had investigated everything from insurance fraud to Ponzi schemes. What he found was one of the most brazen embezzlement schemes he had ever seen. Morrison hadn't even tried to hide most of it. The transfers were right there in the bank records, in her name, to her accounts. The credit card statements showed purchases at Nordstrom, at Sephora, at restaurants she couldn't afford on her legitimate income. The rent payments went directly to her landlord with the HOA listed as the payer. Detective Holloway subpoenaed her personal bank accounts. The deposits matched the HOA withdrawals almost exactly, sometimes within hours of each other. He pulled her tax returns. She had reported a fraction of the income she had actually received. He interviewed her landlord, her car dealership, her children's schools. Every payment checked out, every dollar traced back. The smoking gun was a spreadsheet on her office computer, a document Morrison had created herself, tracking which transfers she had made and which accounts she had taken them from. She had labeled the columns with the HOA names. She had dated every entry. She had essentially kept a diary of her own crimes. When Detective Holloway expanded his investigation to Cypress Ridge, the second HOA Morrison had managed, he found the same pattern. Different bank accounts, same thefts, over $400,000 missing from their reserves, fabricated invoices, ghost vendors, personal expenses buried in operating budgets. Across both associations, the total exceeded $1 million. Detective Holloway interviewed homeowners from both communities. A retired teacher who had paid her dues faithfully for 11 years, never suspecting that the woman she saw at pool parties was using that money to pay her own rent. A young couple who had stretched their budget to afford HOA fees on top of their mortgage, not knowing that their money was funding someone else's car payments. An elderly widow on a fixed income who had been hit with a special assessment to cover unexpected repairs that wouldn't have been necessary if the reserve fund hadn't been systematically looted. 647 households, 647 families, all of them victims. The warrant was signed on March 12, 2024. At 10:23 a.m. on March 14, 2024, Detective Holloway and two Seminole County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Morrison Property Services office on State Road 434 in Winter Springs. They found Tam Morrison standing at a filing cabinet, pulling folders, completely unaware that her entire operation was about to collapse. Tam Morrison, step away from the cabinet. She turned. The folder froze in her hand. Her eyes darted to the desk, to the laptop that was still open, to the phone that was still sitting beside it, then back to the detective standing in the doorway. What? Who are you? I'm working. Seminole County Sheriff's Office. We have a warrant. Her face changed. The professional composure cracked. She stepped toward them, voice rising. A warrant for what? Can someone tell me what's going on? Detective Holloway didn't hesitate. We need you to come with us, right now. Come with you where? I have no idea what you're talking about. This has to be some kind of... Ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back. She didn't turn around. She kept talking. Faster now, the words tumbling out in a desperate attempt to delay what was already inevitable. Wait, can I call someone? Can I call my attorney? I don't understand what's happening. You can call your attorney from booking. Turn around. The handcuffs went on at 10:27 a.m. Tam Morrison, HOA president, property manager, trusted neighbor, was walked out of her own office in front of the strip plaza's other tenants, placed in the back of a marked Seminole County patrol car, and transported to the John E. Polk Correctional Facility. Her booking photo was taken at 11:14 a.m. She was charged with 23 felony counts. Before we get to sentencing, if you want to see more cases where people in positions of trust betray their communities, make sure you're subscribed. We cover stories like this every single week, stories that mainstream media ignores. The Seminole County State Attorney's Office filed formal charges against Tam Morrison on March 18, 2024. The indictment read like a catalog of betrayal. One count of larceny grand theft exceeding $100,000, a first-degree felony under Florida Statute 812.014, carrying a maximum sentence of 30 years in state prison. One count of organized scheme to defraud exceeding $50,000, another first-degree felony under Florida Statute 817.034, also carrying up to 30 years. 16 counts of fraud involving cash deposits with intent to defraud, each a third-degree felony, each carrying up to 5 years. 1 count of false statement to the Florida Department of State. 3 counts of illegal use of a credit card. Morrison's attorney, a private defense lawyer named Richard Castellanos, initially indicated she would fight the charges. He filed motions to suppress the bank records. He challenged the search warrant that had produced the spreadsheet from her computer. He argued that some of the transfers were legitimate management fees that had simply been miscategorized. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The paper trail was undeniable. And when prosecutors made clear that they were prepared to present victim impact statements from dozens of homeowners, retirees, and young families, and single mothers who had paid their dues every month only to watch their money disappear, Morrison's defense strategy changed. In September of 2024, she entered a guilty plea to the grand theft charge and 12 of the fraud counts. The remaining charges were dropped as part of the agreement. Sentencing was scheduled for November. The courtroom was standing room only. Homeowners from both Ashford Park and Cypress Ridge filled the gallery. Some angry, some sad, most just wanting to see the woman who had stolen from them finally held accountable. The victim impact statements took over an hour. Margaret Delacroix, 73 years old, retired schoolteacher, testified that she had been forced to take out a home equity loan to cover a special assessment that wouldn't have been necessary if the reserves hadn't been stolen. "I paid my dues for 11 years, she told the court. "I thought I was investing in my community. Instead, I was paying for her car." David and Jennifer Okonkwo, young parents with 2 children, described how the HOA's deteriorating amenities had lowered their property value when they tried to sell. "We trusted her," David said. "We saw her at neighborhood events. We had no idea." Robert Garrison, 81 years old, a Korean War veteran, testified from a wheelchair. He had been hit with a $2,400 special assessment to cover emergency repairs to the community pool, repairs that should have been funded by the reserve account Morrison had drained. "I served this country," he said, "and this is how I get treated in my own neighborhood." Judge Patricia Waterman listened to every statement. When they were finished, she turned to the defendant. "Ms. Morrison, you held a position of extraordinary trust. Homeowners in these communities had no choice but to pay their dues. The law required it. They trusted that money to be used for the benefit of their neighborhoods. Instead, you treated those accounts as your personal piggy bank. You paid your rent with their money. You bought your cars with their money. You funded your children's activities with their money. And, when questions were asked, you lied. You fabricated documents. You looked your neighbors in the eye and assured them everything was fine, while you were robbing them blind." She paused. This was not a crime of desperation. This was a crime of greed, committed over years, against hundreds of victims who had done nothing wrong except trust you. The court sentences you to 12 years in the Florida Department of Corrections, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $1,047,833.26 to the affected homeowners associations. Tam Morrison showed no visible reaction. She was remanded to custody immediately and transported to Lowell Correctional Institution, a women's facility in Marion County, Florida, approximately 90 miles north of the neighborhoods she had pillaged. Her earliest possible release date is 2032. The homeowners of Ashford Park and Cypress Ridge held a joint meeting 4 weeks after the sentencing. The new management company presented an honest accounting of where they stood. The reserve funds were nearly empty. Multiple major repairs had been deferred for years. It would take a decade of careful budgeting to recover. At the end of the meeting, Gerald Watkins, the retired forensic accountant who had first discovered the fraud, stood to address his neighbors. "We trusted someone we shouldn't have," he said. "That's on us. But we caught her. We held her accountable. And now we rebuild together. No one in that room would ever look at an HOA financial report the same way again. That story was devastating, but the case on the right-hand side involves a betrayal that affected even more families. Click it now.